So the juror for Family Diary 2026 was Jamie M. Allen. She is the Stephen B. and Janice G. Ashley Curator and head of the Department of Photography at the George Eastman Museum, where she's worked for over 18 years. She's curated exhibitions such as Zig Jackson, The Jury of Rising Buffalo, Adam Ekberg, Minor Spectacles, Anastasia Somalilova, I'm not going to get that wrong, Flood Zone, Jess Dugan, To Survive on This Shore, B. Nettles, Harvest of Memory, Nathan Lyons, In Pursuit of Magic, Larson Schindelman's Mobilize, Photography in America's National Parks, and In the Garden. Her books include B. Nettles, Harvest of Memory, Lyons, In Pursuit of Magic, The Photographer in the Garden, Picturing America's National Parks, and the essay From Vision to Reality, a transition from pictorialism to modernism in Imogene Cunningham's work. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn the floor over to Jamie. Let me pin you.
Hello,
All right,
everyone.
Jamie.
Thanks for having me tonight. I was really excited to be invited to jury this show. Um, it's funny because the idea of family and how family appears in photography is something I've been thinking about for a long time, and it's actually one of the reasons I did, in particular, the B. Nettles exhibition, because her work so much speaks about womanhood and motherhood and that need to be within a family unit as you're growing up and like throughout your life, but also that conflict between being an artist and being a mother, right? So she has all these wonderful layers about family in her work, and it was something that really drew me to her work. And it's kind of a through line in things that I've studied. So I work at the George Eastman Museum. If you haven't heard of it, it is one of the oldest collections of photography in the world. We started our collection in 1947, so Queen Victoria beat us out with her collection of photography. But beyond that, major competitors are places like Getty, Victoria and Albert Museum, MoMA, the Met. The High certainly is one of the places that we also have as an esteemed colleague. So really, that's what we do. The thing that most people don't get if they don't know about our museum is that the George Eastman Museum is not George Eastman, the founder of Kodak's personal collection of photography. We are actually a history of photography collection. So we cover everything from pre-photography to contemporary photography. We're continuing to collect today, and it's really a vast collection. The other thing I love about our collection is it's not just art photography. We don't have to think about it in that context. So photography can be science, it can be medical photography, it can be photojournalism, it can be all these different things, vernacular objects. And so the pleasure of my job is looking at our collection of over 400,000 things and trying to make groupings out of them, bring them together in exhibitions and lectures um, and any time I can talk about photography, I want to talk about this like amazing history that we have. So tonight what I did was I put together a little presentation. Oh, apparently I have to send a request to share. We should try
Oh,
that out.
uh,
But I put together just a
okay.
few slides of things from our collection, um, so that you all could get a sense of kind of the breadth of our collection, but also some of the things that I saw um, in this exhibition as I was selecting work, things that made me think of things in our collection. So some of the themes that I saw. So I wanted to start, I'm basically going to present these in chronology, which I don't normally do, but I found it kind of interesting to think about how the idea of presenting family in photography kind of builds. So I went with a very standard family portrait here, not by the artist, but by somebody in his own community. And I think this is like the sense that we get, right? Family is this unit of people that gathers around in a portrait like this. In this particular one, I love that the father is looking off to the side, kind of at the mom, if you will, and that he's also holding the little girl's head so that she doesn't move during the exposure. Pretty early daguerreotype, right? 1852. One of the other things that we have in our holdings is a very large collection of the images of Southworth and Hawes, which was a premier studio out of Boston. And what I love is when they photographed their own family members, they were really experimental. You could see them testing out these other ideas of ways to photograph people. So this picture of his daughter is not just a frontal portrait of her. She's got some sort of personality. She looks shy. She looks like she has something going on. Maybe she's reading or something else. But it kind of starts to transition into some of the things that I saw in the show where the pictures of the people we know can be a little bit more intimate and a little bit more knowing about them, perhaps. This one is another one that I just absolutely love in an era where you might not be able to always get your family together. If everybody had made their individual portraits, you could cut them out and paste them on and put everybody together in a virtual room, if you will, right? This is a pretty high-end hobby for a Victorian lady, but I think it's a really fun one to think about how you might portray your family in a space through a collage or through something of that nature, which again, I saw a lot of people using collage and different kinds of techniques in the submissions. This one I really liked because it does a couple of things. One, we don't know who the family is. It's just a family register, and you see the parents and all the children kind of gathered around. Nobody put their names on the register, unfortunately, which was to me a very weird choice because this is the idea of we are a family and here's our family tree and we're married and it's a kind of a certificate showing that these people are family. So again, that choice to not put people's names on it always has kind of baffled me. But this idea that you could have gotten some canned mat and you could just stick everybody's pictures in it, and that would be, again, how you assemble a picture of family. But then I also was thinking about how we have a lot of snapshots in our collection, and in particular, snapshots by really well-known photographers like Edward Weston. And I loved this one where I think it's Chandler in the back, or is it Neil? I can never remember which one is the oldest one. But the kid in the back is out of focus, right? And again, there's that intimacy in this picture. These kids are so used to the camera probably by this point that it's not any big deal for them to stand and pose. But again, they all have their personality in the photograph, which I also really love. And you'll have noticed I wrote an essay about Imogen Cunningham, so she's one of my favorites. But this is a portrait of her father. And I loved the idea that here he is just walking around at their house. And she just kind of maybe stopped him and wanted to make a portrait of him. And it really turned into one of her really well-known portraits. And does something more than it's not just a snapshot of him, right? There's something more that happens in this photo. And again, it's that intimacy between him and her as they're both working together to make this photograph. And again, that was another theme I saw in the works in this exhibition. So then we start to really think about, like, I think of, Wynne Bullock and Harry Callahan, and in this case, Emmett Gowan, who are all photographing their family. It's what's right there, right? If you're looking for something to do, your muse can be right in that space with you. And he, in this case, Emmett Gowan's, using different lenses and different ways of photographing to kind of transform this space and make it a little bit more of a fantasy or make it a little bit more, maybe one might say artsy. I'm sure that's what my mom would say. But just kind of changing the way that he's looking at his wife. And so you don't have just that simple portrait like we did perhaps with the Westons or with Imogen Cunningham. We have her more as a muse, as a becoming something else beyond herself, perhaps. B. Nettles, like I said, I was really drawn to her work because of this tie-in to family. One of the things I was noticing in the submissions is a lot of people were using historic family photos or historic images in their work to try to think about that idea of tying in time, even text that had come in. And that's something that B has always done in her work. So this is actually the portrait of the little girl in the middle that's her sister. And it's one of the first photographs B took when she was a young girl. And she kept all of her negatives and later returned to them and used a lot of those early images in her art as she was making things. So this is actually a piece that's on fabric on the back, and there's stitching on it, and it's a hand-coated emulsion. And then there's this little figure who's encapsulated and kind of on the front as a photographic print, right? So there's multiple processes going on. There's a lot of going on there. And I just always have loved that she held on to those family photos and that they continued to symbolize things for her through time. And she continued to kind of rework the same image over and over again in a lot of different ways. And it was really fun when I was working with her because I'd say, "Oh, that's that same picture from this other one." She'd be like, "It is?" So she wouldn't even remember that she was really using these pictures over and over again. This is another one where I was thinking about how people are using objects to symbolize others and to think about, um, you know, like here's what's remaining of this moment in time or this individual that I no longer perhaps have with me. And so this is a photograph by Dina Dar. It's actually a Xerox print, essentially, an electrostatic. So she would have laid everything on the copy machine and made that print. And then I love that she's using her own vest from when she was a child and they immigrated from Poland. It's what she had worn, as well as her father's, I think it's her father's passport there, his kind of citizenship card. And then these flowers have some sort of memory and meaning to them. And she does this quite often in her electrostatic work, where she's incorporating family photographs and making some of them negative. And again, that was another thing I saw within the works in this show. So I loved that connection. One of the other things I noticed in the show is that family can be difficult. Family can be really, really hard to be with, or they might reject you outright. And so this portrait of Albert Wynn is a family, there's a self-portrait of him with his family photo. But as a queer individual, he was no longer allowed to really be with his family. So he was making this idea of, I'm not really part of the family picture anymore within this image. And he really works through these things within his photographs. His partner, Scott Partnoff, who ended up donating many of his works to our collection, um, you know, they worked together to make portraits of them, right? Of their, it's not a found family at that point because they're a couple, but maybe their friends also came into the photos and different ways of being Jewish in particular, because Albert Wynn was Jewish, came into the play as well. So, kind of how do you portray yourself when you're having a difficulty with a family unit? And I also like the idea, of course, of found family as well. We see that a lot in queer photography, where you don't necessarily have a family, but you have a chosen family, right? And I see that more and more in kind of everyday life. I hear other people now taking on that idea from the queer community into their lives of, oh, this is my found family, right? This is my chosen family. It's not my birth family, but it's the family that's important to me. And I love that idea that we build the relationships that we need. And one last one, because I wanted to bring it into the contemporary world here, but this is a photograph by Tommy Kaw, also in our collection, of him and his mother. Tommy Kaw grew up in Memphis, and as a person whose family had immigrated there prior to his birth, he was born in the United States. But just kind of working through being somebody who didn't look like all the people around you in Memphis, and thinking about his relationship with his mother and how in perhaps his culture it's a little bit different than he was told by other people. So thinking through these things again in his photographs, sometimes it looks like he and his mother are very much at a distance from each other. Sometimes it looks like they're very close. And I love this one where he's sort of hiding and she's protecting him and interrogating us with her light, kind of allowing him to be who he is, peeking in on the world, but serving as that kind of facade in a way. So those are the photos I brought to share with you all tonight. And again, I really enjoyed looking at this exhibition and thinking about the submissions and how all these different kinds of ways of expressing ourselves were coming through in photographs.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Okay, remove these. I'm going to go back to sharing. Okay. So that brings us to the works that are in Family Diary 2026 this year. And these are the featured artists that are in the show. And first up tonight, we have Amy McCrory, who is going to speak about her three works that are in the show. So, Amy, the floor is yours.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, at this stage of my life, well, first of all, let me just tell you, I'm from Houston. I'm a Houston-based artist. So, but now I'll tell you about the work. At this stage of my life, I feel the need to reconnect with the people who shaped me, even though they are no longer physically present. My father was murdered 47 years ago, and the decades since have been marked not only by grief, but a relentless search for connection. This body of work is my way of stepping back into that fundamental bond. Through costuming and staging and self-portraiture, I place myself in imagined moments drawn from my family's world, how they might have been and how they may have felt. Clothing becomes a form of memory work. The weight of the jacket, the color of the dress, the palette of the era. These garments are not props, they're catalysts. When I wear them, I sense how my parents carried themselves, their tenderness, their restraint, the audacity and playfulness. My body remembers what my mind cannot retrieve, and I photograph those sensate feelings. I'm not reenacting their lives or reconstructing the violence that ended my father's life. Instead, I explore the subtle traces of who they were before the loss reshaped everything. This work is an act of assimilation, moving toward presence rather than absence, and using the language of stage photography to commune with my lineage.
Wonderful.
I just wanted to say, Amy,
Hey,
that if I can I interject?
yeah.
That
Interject,
when I
interject.
first saw these pictures, I was like, oh, they're portraits of her parents. And then I like came back and I was like, there's something different going on here. And then the staging and the playfulness of the staging really came through, and it really made me keep looking, which I loved. And it reminds me a little bit of like Gillian Waring, who dons her family's masks and those kinds of things to become family members. But in this case, I love that like it really seemed like your personality had transformed in each of the images, and I appreciated that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And
Yeah,
if I
it's been
may
fun.
say, I was going to say this was my favorite work of the exhibition because when I see this picture of the woman in the kitchen, that was my great Aunt Dorothy. Like just that, I come from a Jewish background and I love the her apron and and the look and everything about her. And I was just touched by my connection to my family that I was visually seeing through these photographs. So thank you for that, and I just really loved it. So
Thank you,
just
Royce.
oh, you're welcome.
I have that same green mixing bowl.
That's
I
funny.
got it.
It's old.
So next up is the work of Astrid Reichwitz, who unfortunately could not be here with us this evening. She has three pieces in the show. This one's called A Pleasure to Give Liver. I wanted to find out the story behind this image, so I'll have to
I
reach
read
out to
that
her
title.
separately.
When I read that title, I thought, what the heck is going, like, it's a pleasure to give liver. What a weird phrase for a culture to have. But then these, I love the stitching and, with my work with B. Nettles and Betty Hahn and a lot of artists from the kind of 70s and 80s era, particularly women, but also people like Keith Smith who were doing quilting and that kind of thing with photography. I love like the visceral idea of these and how just odd the historic images or these kind of more culturally specific images that she was using were.
The daughter of Thistle
I love these pieces.
and the fall of the double-headed eagle. So that was it. Okay. Up next is Beata Sass, and the floor is yours, Beata.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Amy and David for making this exhibit and the Jurors Talk possible. It's really an honor to be included. The three collages that were chosen for this exhibit are really part of a project I'm working on, which I'm combining vintage photographs from both my and my husband's families with found papers and ephemera. I was motivated to use these family photos to reconstruct family narratives for two reasons. First, as a photographer who's also a dedicated printer, having access to a physical print is meaningful to me aesthetically, but also historically. The story of a photo held in one's hand beckons to be heard. My sons and grandsons' generation will amass a collection of thousands, maybe millions of cell phone pictures over their lifetime, but will they be cherished? And will the pictures that reside in the cloud carry stories that will be passed down to future generations? Like, who will remember our stories? The other reason I decided to embark on this project is that the keepers of our family stories are few and elderly. So I've felt a sense of urgency to learn all I can about the relatives posing in these inherited photos. And despite my best attempts, memories are incomplete, which has left me with the task of reconstructing our relatives' stories. By cutting, layering, and assembling the components of these collages, I explore how memory is shaped, not only by what is preserved, but also by what is forgotten, altered, and unknowable.
Felt like seeing these in person would be a totally different experience. So I hope that's true for everybody who got to see them in person.
Yeah, the pieces look great in person. I mean, they look great here too, but they like it really resonates in person.
Can I just ask
Yeah.
how big are these pieces?
The paper I used was 14 by 17. Most of them have like a 2-inch, 1.5 to 2-inch border.
Thank you, Beata.
Thank you so much.
And next up is Beth Chucker.
Hi.
And hello, how are you?
Good. It's my first time doing this with you guys. We're in general. I'm not in general, but I am originally from the Washington, D.C. area, then LA, and now I live in New Jersey. My work for about the last probably 24 years has been pulling from, fam issues in family dynamics. It started with looking at my parents, marriage, and then my mom's untimely death, and then loss and what you learn from the loss, like within family and family histories and stories, and looking at old family photos and working through those. But all through this, I've always been documenting my home. The first image was from a work in progress, which was my journey into with fertility, the loss of two pregnancies, and then the final pregnancy with our twins. And just sort of looking at, how things would change. So that's what this first image is, right before Beth and Jim become mom and dad. I had done some work with called Darkened Snapshots, which was about looking at my parents' marriage before they were mom and dad. So it's sort of, there's always these repeats. And then since I am a mom of twins, now, my work still stays within, as Jamie would say, which was lovely to hear, the home base and sort of documenting us. I have, I have experience in commercial photography, not using it as much, more of going to school, but also a lot of fine art background in photography. So I use all of these things to kind of create this film and post-documentary look to my work. That's it. I'm a little nervous, so
You did great.
I
thanks.
really appreciate how people who have a creative impetus and a need to make photographs in particular, it's like you have to find a space to be in that moment all the time. And if all you have as a parent, I know I feel trapped in my house sometimes. And if that's all I have, that's the space I have to be in. And I've met so many artists, women and men, who have had that kind of moment in their life where they had to be a parent and an artist at the same time. And how do you balance those things? And sometimes it means bringing your kids in kind of that Sally Mann kind of way, or other ways, but also just that's what is the work that you're making. And I think it's so important for us to recognize that home life is a work of art itself in some way. So I appreciate these images a lot.
Thank you.
So that brings us next to Beth Galton.
I thank you again for including me in this amazing exhibition. I come from I live in New York City. I come from the commercial world, and I've always had my own personal practice. And in 2017, both my mom and dad, who had not lived together for more than 50 years, died 3 days apart. And they were in different states. They had no relationship to each other. And I inherited my mom's house. And in going through it, I began to uncover all these memorabilia of my childhood, many things that I didn't even remember. So in order to kind of process this event, I brought things back to my studio and created this body of work called Memory of Absence. And these two photos are part of that series. As I sifted through their belongings, I tried to untangle my mother's fraught relationship with the world. It was always kind of dysfunctional, and we struggled as a parent and child. And I spent a lot of time looking for what caused so much turmoil. So in these two images, um, the 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 last one, Passed from Generations, it was kind of exploring the idea that how one treats their their children is very similar to how they're treated as a child. So it's kind of this kind of um, passed from generation to generation. I saw how my grandmother treated my mother was the same way that my mother treated me, and this is really a story about the three of us. There's my grandmother's reflection in the mirror, and the photograph of my mother, and then pictures of me being held by both of them. And mother and music was the one thing that was a great joy in my mother's life that kind of made her um, kind of fulfilled who she was. So it played an important part in this whole series of trying to integrate it with her, because it's looking at, I was kind of trying to deal with my own feelings and then also kind of rediscover who she was and have a better chance to explore her. And then quickly, the way that I created these photographs is I created the still lifes first, the interior still lifes. And I showed them around, and people didn't quite get what I was trying to say. And I thought I need to kind of go back in the studio. And I worked for a while and came up with the idea of printing out the photograph and then taking elements from the photograph and integrating it into the final image. And I feel like by creating all these layers, it kind of underscores the complex and layered emotions that we all find in family dynamics.
Thank you so much, Beth.
Yeah.
That brings us to Beth Hirtschaft. And I did not hear from Beth. But Beth, if you're here and you want to talk, just drop a note in chat and I'll circle back around to you. But these are her 4 pieces that are in the show. They're all called Untitled.
But also about the idea of inheriting a space and having to deal with cleaning it out. Again, not necessarily the bright side always of being in a family. Maybe it's a space that you don't necessarily want to be a part of anymore. So that's kind of how I felt when I was reading her artist statement.
That brings us to Carol Kavanaugh next. And so, Carol, want to tell us about your images?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, David, and thank you, Jamie. I'm blown away by the work in this show, and it's really a privilege to be included. These 2 works are from a series that is still a work in progress, still going on, not complete, called Documented. And it merges 2 photographic styles that are important to immigrant experience. So the word documented, of course, implies undocumented. And what does that mean? And the 2 styles that I wanted to bring together here were the photo as a proof of identity, an ID photo, a green card, a passport photo, and the idea that this is somehow relevant to who we are, our ID photos, and yet they're usually the kind of austere and kind of stiff, and I don't think many of us would point to a passport photo and say, this is who I really am. That style of photography and the family album, which is so important to anybody who has left home and come to a new place. The album as what I'm calling a reliquary of memories, loss, love, dreams. And so the subject here is Nobuo, and he came to the United States in the 1970s. He came on a student visa. He got a green card. He became a naturalized citizen, and he had a long career as a college professor. And I took 2 portraits of him. He was 81. This was in 2024. And one faces forward, one faces backward. And with the idea, of course, that when you leave home, come to a new home, you're always, looking forward and with anticipation and looking backward with other kinds of feelings. And I superimposed on these photos that kind of look like ID photos, scans of childhood photos and documents of his. This one is called Father, and this is, I love this particular family photo because everybody's facing in a different direction in that picture. And the family photos were from the late 1940s, early 1950s, when Japan, where Nobuo came from, was during the American occupation of Japan. And that was when democracy and human rights and laws modeled on the United States became an integral part of Japanese culture, government, society. And so to me, it was kind of ironic that these images that were so important in an immigrant's life were taken at a time when American democracy was being spread around the world. And we were hearing the rhetoric of the campaign in the summer of 2024, which was very anti-immigrant. So it has a kind of political element to it, but for me, that's almost not the most important part. It's more about just the experience of leaving home, coming to a new place, and bringing with you memories. So that's how this came together.
Thank you so much, Carol. Your work has generated a lot of conversation for people that have been visiting the gallery. A lot of people love these two pieces.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for telling me. I'm really happy to hear that. It's one of those things that came together immediately. The thought was there, the idea was there, the images were there. So I'm glad that people are responding to it.
Yeah, and they look great hanging together.
Thank you.
So next up is Chip Standifer. And so, Chip, the floor is yours.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Jamie, for selecting my images. This is such an amazing show. I'm really honored to be included with this group of great artists. These photographs are all part of a project I'm working on called Precious Stories. The work is concerned with loss at the level of memory and knowledge. When people die, what disappears is not only their physical presence, but their lived experience, stories, and understanding they carried, the things that cannot be fully recorded or inherited. I photograph objects and locations that remain after this loss, aware that they exist without the voices that once gave them meaning. By manipulating each print by hand, embellishing it with gold and silver, I acknowledge both care and the futility, an attempt to mark value and attention while recognizing that memory cannot be fully preserved. The work sits in that space between holding on and letting go, where photography becomes less an archive and more a record of absence. And the interesting thing is when working on this project, as I've grown older, I now see the objects differently. I think, am I remembering the story correctly? I realize that I'm the vessel of the knowledge now, and my own imperfection leads me to wonder more and more about my memory and the realization of the gaps that'll be there when I'm gone.
Great. Well, thank you, Chip. And next up is Dell Niles. She was unable to be with us this evening. This is her work entitled Mommy. And next up is Damian Jackson with his three works. So, Damian, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. And Jamie, thanks so much for selecting my pieces for this fantastic show. I love family. I love ancestry. This is my bailiwick. All this stuff is fantastic, and these artists have really done a great job here. So my pieces are about my grandmother's funeral. A year before my grandmother died, she asked me to photograph her funeral. She was the matriarch of our family and the kind of elder whose presence could organize a room without a word. She lived to about 101 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, rooted in faith, ritual, and quiet authority that outlasted hardship. Her request changed the meaning of the day for me. It gave me permission, not just to make pictures, but to stay present inside grief without flinching. In Caribbean families, funerals are not private affairs, they're communal choreography. There's the interior of the church, hymn books, lace veils, polished casket, the steady hum of the fans and sunlight. And there's the outside work, the procession, the gathering at the grave, the earth being turned. Everyone has a role. Everyone carries something. These photographs are my entry in the diary of life, what I saw, what I held, and what I learned while the family moved through loss together. I'm drawn to the small gestures where a whole world sits. A hand on the shoulder through a lace, a program folded and refolded, the posture of a man reading an order of service as it might stabilize him. I photograph the discipline of mourning, the way people keep standing, keep singing, keep walking, even when their bodies want to collapse. My grandmother's instructions also became a threshold. She named my gift as something I was allowed to inhabit fully. That day, I stopped negotiating with uncertainty, shame, or fear of disappointing people. Her blessing gave me a new obligation to show up with clarity, to work with respect, and to trust that the camera as a tool for truth. In this series, The family is both subject and structure. The images hold tenderness and restraint, intimacy and distance, because grief asks for both. They also hold lineage, the matriarch's final gathering, the community she shaped, and the living who carried her forward. Photography becomes a form of witness, a record of devotion, and a way of keeping memory from turning into rumor. These frames are not meant to resolve loss, they're meant to honor it and to honor the love that made it heavy. Thank you.
I want to say,
Thank
Damien,
you.
that I was really touched by in your statement where you talk about your grandmother giving you permission to be you, essentially, and that you found that to be so energizing for yourself and reassuring that you could be a photographer and could do these things. And I also think that people, our society currently has a lot of kind of taboos around the idea of photographing death and funerals, and it's such an important piece of what we as human beings go through, just like a birthday party or a baby in the hospital. The closure of life and the people that remain at that moment is also very important. And there's a super long history of photographing postmortems and photographing funerary services. And so I was really pleased to see this kind of idea of the circle of life come through in the work too.
Yeah, these works are incredibly impressive looking in the gallery. They're all like what, 30 by 40, I think. And they're hanging on a wall all by themselves. And um, yeah, they're stunning. In this particular photograph, like the two men are like, it's so dramatic. Um, but I love also looking at the people in the background that are there and the different ways they're experiencing that moment. Yeah.
This Saturday, the Hartwell pickup. What's the window for?
Okay, next that brings us to Deborah Barnhart with her two works. So Deborah, you are up.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jamie, for choosing my work, and thank you, David, for featuring it in some of the promotions for this exhibition. I have a clear memory of being at the APG gallery, and maybe it was for a hang or something, and Brian Galgano was there, and I said, "So what's the next call out going to be?" And he said, "Family Diary," and I was like, "Oh no." And the reason I'm coming from a very different place. I came from a very small nuclear family. My brother is 6 years older than me, so I'm close with him now. He also happens to be a photographer. And in these photos, I was obviously thinking about childhood. So these are my two great nieces. They're my brother's grandchildren. And they are very, very close in age. And you can't necessarily tell by these photos, but they are just practically connected at the hip, you know. They're almost inseparable. And I took these photos between 1921 and 1924. And the other photo, Crackers, is the most recent one, which when I looked at it again, I just was like, I just thought it was so funny because they're like, okay, what do you want? You know, whereas before, um, my presence with a camera was like not influencing them at all. I have pictures of them in the pool, pictures of them together. Um, but in this particular photo, they are more aware of me. And on the left is Jordana. She's the younger one. On the right is Giselle. And Giselle actually loves the camera. I've done portraits of her that have been in previous exhibitions at APG. Um, But yeah, I mean, I think that I was coming from a place of loneliness in looking at my own childhood and then looking at this, you know. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, I love the attitude of your niece on the left there
This
with the
is
towel on her
wonderful.
head and his eyes cutting over. Wonderful.
Thank you.
So next up is Isabel Chenoweth. So Isabel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you, Jamie and David. I love this exhibit. And I have to say, when I saw the call for entry, I was really excited because this is exactly sort of what I love to do and look at. Um, my project, I started this during the pandemic. It started as kind of a pandemic project, and it is bringing sort of a visual component to text that my grandmother wrote in a diary in 1930, actually 1930 to 33. And the way that came about was she died in 2000 in Jacksonville, Florida, and I went to the funeral and stayed in her house. And on her bookshelf, I just spotted this little book that looked like a diary, and I slipped it into my bag because I was afraid that somebody might throw it away or it would end up in a box with used books going to a used bookstore. And um, I was just, I wanted to protect it and I wanted to look at it, but it was too close to her death to look at it. I put it away and I didn't find it again until 2020. She died in 2000. So I found it 20 years later at the beginning of the pandemic. I started reading it and it really resonated with me on a lot of levels. She was 24 when she started it. She had just gotten married. She moved from Nashville, Tennessee to Jacksonville, Florida with her new husband. The stock market crash of 1929 had happened 2 months before their marriage. Um, my grandfather was struggling to start a law practice. She knew nobody in Jacksonville, and she had actually gotten a master's degree in English literature at Vanderbilt. And I found out from reading the diary that she had wanted to be a writer, but she ended up getting married. She hated cooking, she hated kind of the domestic responsibilities. So she wrote a lot about that. She wrote about burning herself trying to cook. Um, and then she actually, at some points during the diary, had submitted pieces to various publications and gotten rejected and was very depressed about it. Um, she ended up having a baby during that first year of marriage and then another one quickly after. But she writes about the loneliness of being in a new place, the isolation, not having family or friends, the awkwardness of finding new friends, the weirdness of, having to play bridge when she hated bridge and being terrible at it. And there were all these moments in it that you could just kind of feel and seemed really universal. Um, and then being rejected, having something that you really cared about and wanted to pursue and feeling rejection. And there were just so many things in this diary that I felt went beyond, just an experience in 1930. There were moments that I could really relate to, and probably all of us at some point in our lives can relate to. Um, so I started just thinking about the text and going out and photographing. I pulled moments from the text that I thought were particularly funny or poignant. Um, and I kind of matched. I It's hard. It's hard because you don't want to be literal, but that is sort of it's the easiest way to go is to be literal, but you don't want to be literal. And so I kept mixing and matching and trying different things. So it's still evolving. But these images, in the show come from this one is actually 2010. My daughter doing dress up in a in an attic in a family house. And then there's another one with my daughter-in-law and new grandson, and another one with another grandson playing in the backyard. And this image to me felt really universal. You know, everybody has lived this moment of a backyard fort and just getting lost in an afternoon. So I was really trying to find images that could kind of feel universal and feel timeless, while I was reading words that to me felt timeless in a way. Um, the diary does end after 3 years, kind of tragically, because she developed a very close friendship to a woman named Lida, who had a baby around the same time my mother was born in 1930. And then Lida had a second child and developed strep throat in the hospital and died. And so one of the last entries in the diary is my grandmother wrote, "My heart almost stopped beating when I heard the phone because I knew what had happened." And then there's some entries where she sits with the family and talks about the weight of grief. Um, so it's been a really meaningful project for me, just being absorbed in, you know, what she was writing at the age of 24. I mean, you know, our grandmothers, we don't know them until they're much, much older. So it was a really, really meaningful experience for me to work on this. So thank you for selecting my works.
Thank you, Isabel.
Mhm.
And next up is Jenny Lynn Pawelski. The floor is yours, Jenny Lynn.
Hi. Hello to my fellow photographers, and thank you to APG and to Jamie. And I really love that slideshow from the George Eastman collection. It was that's a very cool way to start a juror talk. Um, so these two images are from a series called Allison's Family. It's a long-term photographic study of the family of one of my closest friends, and it spans about 25 years. Um, the images in this series are both documentary, candid photos, and there's also portraits included. And in the last several months, I have really been editing this project in earnest, collaborating with my friend Allison, whose family this is. And we've just been looking through all the images and discussing and finding these narrative threads. And for her, it's dovetailing with her own efforts to work on some memoir writing. And so, sort of excavating her life as we're looking through these images. And ultimately, I would like for the project to be a book project. And sort of once I get to a final edit, I'll be starting to look for input on sequencing. The project is about the family, but it's also about the individuals in the family. There's four kids now, plus Allison's husband. And over the years, it has taken on new meaning at different points. They're now a military family. They're an immigrant family. That wasn't necessarily the impetus for making any of the images, but I'm just starting to really think about the family. And but it's also sort of the story of my friendship with Allison. We have rarely lived in the same town in the history of our friendship. So it's really about all these times that we come together and connect. And I mean, I love my own family as well. These are also chosen family members. So I feel like sometimes when we say chosen family, it's like, oh, we're disowning our original family, but love them both. And but I am considered like an auntie, basically, within the context of this family. And the images throughout this series are, like I said, they're taken at times when we're connecting. So it's visits, it's celebrations, it's vacations. So it's not necessarily like a full family diary of every moment. And I'm not there for like all of the ER visits or the some of the spectacular things or mundane things that can happen in a family. But I feel like there's a lot of themes that kind of run through this project and sort of my work in general. I'm really interested in time passing and these sort of like these echoes. Like I always loved Nixon's series with the sisters. I just love just seeing, these pictures of the same people over a period of time. So that's not really communicated necessarily in these two images, but there's just so many images in this project that's kind of hard to represent the whole project with just one or two images. In the image that we're looking at right now, this is it's called the full title is something along the lines of Morning Hug with Espresso and Rubber Chicken. So that's a rubber chicken in the backpack. Um, and the rubber chicken is also called El Pollo. And it's the basis of a game that Jose, who was a teacher at the Waldorf School, was a game that they played. And so this is just a really sweet moment as everybody is getting ready to go to school. Jose's and Allison's son, Luca, giving a quick hug before heading out to school. And um, I wasn't often there for these school mornings. So this one is a sweet memory for me. And then the second photo is a picture of Chloe, Allison's daughter, in her lap. This is sort of in the wee hours of the first day of 2025. So after a family New Year's Eve celebration. And Chloe is on leave from her time in the Marines. And I just really love the intimacy of this image and the intimacy between the two of them, but also it's sort of the nature of this project, having worked on it for so long. As anyone who's ever done any type of long-term documentary projects, you just get to a point where people aren't paying attention to the camera so much. So you get sort of a different ability to photograph them at all these moments. Which is not to say that kids don't become aware of the camera at times and have interest in um, forming their own images. And so I do have more what I would consider collaborative portraits where different people in the family want to be photographed and are actively participating in the making of that photograph. And yeah, I think that's what I want to say.
Okay.
I do really love this show. I was also similarly excited to see a call for Family Diary. So thank you for including me.
Thank you, Jenny Lynn. And next up is Joseph Kapansky with his three works in the show. So, Joseph.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. David and Jamie, thank you guys for selecting my photos to be a part of this exhibition. I come from a background in filmmaking, and so this year I made a goal of trying to push my photography more. I've been taking photos really, or just like capturing images since I was in like fourth grade, I think is when I got my first like digital kind of just like toy camera kind of thing. And um, when I saw the Family Diary open call, I just felt like it was like my calling because I just feel like my entire life I've been documenting my family and my friends. It's just like it's come so naturally to me. And I grew up with both of my parents like constantly documenting me and my siblings and what we're doing and trips we would take. And my dad is like very much like an adventurous person, but is also like extremely like introverted, which is those two things like kind of like conflict each other a little bit. But um, these images that I submitted to this exhibition are from some trips that I took with my family. This image is of my dad and my brother. My dad's up in the boat. My brother's in the water here. We used to take these trips to Florida and we would snorkel along the coral reefs along the Florida Keys. And this reef in particular that we're at, called Sombrero Reef, is the first reef I ever snorkeled on. And just last year in 2025, we decided to take a trip back to Sombrero Reef and return like almost 20 years later, and kind of experience kind of experience it again, but 20 years later. And I think we've all changed so much. I remember as a kid feeling very anxious going out into the open water. And even though I've grown up a lot and I feel like I am okay and comfortable being in water, I still, when we were going back out this most recent trip, I could feel like this anxiety like returning within me. Um, but at the same time, I was really excited to capture this moment because coming from the place where my parents captured me and my siblings, it was kind of fun to kind of flip the script and document them, but through my perspective. So I got really into darkroom printing 2 years ago, and that was another part of this process. I printed these on warm tone paper to try and capture some of the feelings of the summers that we would take down to Florida. And I used a camera I was not really familiar with for these. I couldn't really look through the viewfinder because I was like wearing a mask, and it was really rough that day. And I was just kind of shooting from the hip and just kind of had to set my focus and hope that I got it. And I probably shot like 2 rolls while we were there, and only a handful of images like came out. But these that I selected, were the ones that kind of made the cut and that kind of hit the most. Yeah, thank you once again, and I appreciate you guys taking a look at my work. And thank you again, Jamie, and thank you, David.
Thank you, Joseph. And next up is KK Jort. So, Karen, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to also just echo all the thanks for being a part of this show. It's been amazing getting to see all of your amazing work as well. These images are from a long form documentary series I made over the course of one summer with my 2 small children. The project functions sort of like a captain's log, each image marked by time moving through the day as caregiving unfolds. When I first became a mother about 4 years ago, I felt like I'd been dropped onto a new planet. The surroundings were familiar, my home, my neighborhood, but everything else felt really alien. Time moved differently. The structure of the series grew from a need to orient myself in this new terrain. I think a lot about how family photography often centers on milestones, birthdays, holidays, and perfectly posed portraits. I'm more interested in what happens between those moments, though. The ordinary, the boring, the repetitive, and sometimes chaotic architecture of daily life, especially that daily life with small children. In the breakfast image that you first saw, there's a containment and observance. I'm both a participant, but I'm also kind of an outsider observer. By the afternoon, in the second image, there's a mound of dirt and my children very far away from me. And all of a sudden, the world feels like it's been expanded and it's unstable. The landscape oddly mirrors my own experience of early motherhood itself. Thanks. I'm going to finish my talk. Okay. By naming the project Karen Was Here, I'm asserting my own presence within a genre that often renders the mother invisible behind the camera. This work isn't about nostalgia, it's about visibility. It's a way of orienting myself in a landscape and refusing to disappear inside of it. So that's the work, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of this great group show.
Thank you very much.
I'm almost done.
Next
Thank
up
you.
is Lisa McCord. So, Lisa, you are up.
Hi, I'm Lisa.
There you are.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. Thank you for including me. I'm an LA-based artist from the Arkansas Delta, and I've always photographed family and community. This series, Waiting for the Trial, is a collection of photographs made during the 3 weeks my mother, brother, and Linda and I were staying in a small motel in the Arkansas Delta, waiting for my brother's court date. And my brother died of a self-inflicted gun wound to the heart on December 25th, 1990. He was 25 years old, 5 years after these images were taken, and all these images were taken waiting for his court date. Since my brother's death, mental illness and addiction are significantly more understood and discussed. I share his story as a sincere contribution to the conversation in the hopes that the stories of others can end differently. So this is we were in a motel, and it's a long story, so you'd have to read the story in my on my website. But basically, we were just in a motel room waiting for his court date, which he had gotten arrested for drunk driving, and we didn't realize how much suffering he was suffering till after his death, and we didn't really know how to help him. And it was different in the 80s. I was a young girl, 25 years old myself, and I took him to Betty Ford's. I drove him there because I was living in LA, and he came to live with me. And we went to Betty Ford's, and they turned us away. And because we were young, they take mostly adults older than he was. And none of us realized how much he was suffering. And he died. And then I talk about his addictions and his mental illness, as well as my family's mental illness in our family. My recent work at LACP is also about my own psychiatry disorder. So that's what my biggest conversation is right now in my work. That's why I applied with this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for
Yeah.
sharing those images with us.
Thank you.
Next up is Melanie Brown. So, Melanie, would you like to tell us about your 4 images in the show? Mel here. I don't see her in the chat room. So, Mel, if you are here, and just drop us a note in the chat, and I will be sure to circle back to you. But these are her 4 images. And then there's Melinda Reyes. I believe Linda wasn't able to be with us tonight. So let me just double check that. Yeah, she was not able to be with us tonight. But these are her 3 images from the show.
I believe these were photographs of her granddaughters.
Nice. And next up is Michael Ray. And
Hello,
so, Michael,
everyone.
would you like to? Hey,
Yeah. Juried shows are a funny animal. And it's really nice to be able to see everybody else's work. I quit doing juried shows about 30 years ago. I'm that old. And one of the reasons I quit and then actually started again here a few years ago is because of family. I pretty much maybe the oldest person here or fairly close. I pretty much gave up a lot or many professional opportunities because of family. And so basically, family always been number one. Number two has always been photography. So everything I do really has something to do with family, even if they're not in it. I'm always interested in what is in the frame. But what I decided to do on these was talk about what is not in the frame, but which would both clarify some of the images, but also maybe confuse it a little bit. Because as somebody said, I did not want to be literal. I really have a problem with how we believe photographs are telling us something truthful, because I think they tend to actually just confirm what we already think most of the time. So I'm always looking for a way to make the viewer think twice about what this image is about. So I decided just to go ahead and use text on these things. The titles, I, I, I didn't plan this all completely out. I started working on one and it just kind of, I found kind of a methodology working through a few of them. And the title always just comes from one of the words in the narrative. So I gave up many opportunities about professional opportunities because of family, which eventually also led to being a single father. And then which led to being estranged from that child as an adult because of mental health issues on the child's part. And then kind of like coming back with hands-on grandparenting. And so, for instance, these photographs, top right, my grandson is standing on the rock fishing. My wife, a woman with a parasol, which was just perfect. I saw that happening and I was like, I could not believe I was going to get the opportunity to make that photograph because she's holding the Monet umbrella that we got at one of the Monet shows. So all the photographs relate to either place or family, and if place has something to do with family. This one in bloom, that's my granddaughter in the left shadow image. I have a friend who says, "Oh, that's Ray Bradbury's Something Evil Comes This Way." So since it's my granddaughter, I had to retitle that in my mind, Something Comes This Way. I gave up juried shows, but I decided to start doing them again because needed to get a little street credibility again. And I entered this show particularly because of Jamie and her knowledge of history of photography. All my mentors and teachers have died pretty much except one, which would be Betty Hahn, who you would know. And Betty introduced me one time, or a few of us, to Henry Holmes Smith. And I remember him asking us to get in close and telling us like, okay, here's the secret, guys, kind of thing in his very, very kind of quiet, humble way. But he implored us to always be truthful, to make it really truthful and make it count. And so these are both functional for me in that they help me clarify some things about family, and they give me an opportunity to work with some theoretical ideas about how photographs mean what they mean. In my statement, I just talked about about the theory about why I was doing it this way. But really, the text is both truthful and not truthful in that it sometimes confirms what the picture is, and sometimes it talks about something completely else, something completely different. But they all bear on our understanding of the photograph. And my idea in doing them this way was I wanted to cut the viewer loose from their first reading of the photograph, and make the narrative simple enough that it wouldn't take them very long to read it. And they might think, oh, I get it. But then, in a second or in another moment, like maybe not so sure. And I think that's the way family is. You get it, and then you're not so sure, and you're wondering about it. And that's the way photographs are too, I think. We think we get it, but if we pause for a little bit, maybe it's not quite as obvious or as truthful as we would like to believe. And that's pretty much the way our experience in the world is too. So I think of these as really as a dive into a different kind of realism. And I wanted to thank Jamie for being interested enough in them to pick them. And I always thought, I said, like I said, gave up a lot of opportunities. I knew a lot of people in Rochester. Maybe you know Ken White, who's still there. But I think the main thing about my work has always been that it is functional and truthful for me about something that I think is important. And I don't think it's important that everybody else know about it, but if I can make a piece that will carry some of that into the world, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is the work of Quintavious Oliver. Unfortunately, he was not able to join us tonight. This is his piece, A Bronx Love Story. This is Madonna and Child.
Works, I really love that idea of looking at, I think somebody was talking about, we're not family and chosen family in those words, but we call it framily, right? The friends that are our family, FR family. But, just looking at how home life looks, I thought was also an important aspect of this show.
Quintavious and his daughter. And next up is Royce Sobel. So Royce, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Jamie, thank you so much for selecting these works. I am an Atlanta native and have been documenting my life in social nightlife and my friends in those spaces for over 30 plus years now. I want to just briefly for my statement, and then I'll discuss the images specifically. But when I think of family, I think of those who give me a sense of joy and safety, people with whom I feel deeply connected with. Family exists in many forms. There are those bound by bloodline, lineage, and heritage, and then there are those who are chosen. Within the queer community, chosen family emerges through shared lived experiences, care, and mutual recognition. My queer family is sacred to me. It is formed through intention and resilience. It is shaped by the need to create spaces of belonging where identity is affirmed rather than explained. And these relationships function as both refuge and celebration, offering a trust, vulnerability, and support. And rooted into this deep understanding of collective memory and love, my queer family is not secondary to blood relations. It is sustaining and enduring, and it is essential. So these two images I have photographed over the last 15 years. One, this is of my friend Rami. This is getting ready to go to Dragon Con down at the Marriott Marquis downtown. I just love that the gender queerness before we even understood some of the terminology that we use now, the fluidity of the lipstick against the grain and contrast of the scruff of the face. I also like the colors of the pale yellow and reds and blues, almost the primary colors of the American person. The other image is a space at Sister Louisa's Church of Ping Pong Emporium, which is a wonderful space where everyone is included in going, but on a specific day of the week, which was Sunday services, where we would listen to gospel house music and see what our church was like on the dance floor. And this is a moment captured of what I call the purest joy. My best friend Chris, who I've known for over 35 years, is the one in front with the arms raised out and the biggest smile of goofy joy on their face. And my friend Jules behind her, who is feeling the sense of the love of the goddesses and then some above. The work that I shot with a particular camera and an exposed delayed flash was a way to create the richness of color, which then evokes the richness of the mood and also just again the saturation of the joy that I feel when I look at this work. I find that it's interesting to have and grateful to have both a very closeness with my true blood family, but also a deep connection with my chosen queer family. Each are essential to my joy and security of being who I am in this world, how I exist in this world, especially living in Atlanta, which is to me a wonderful place for queer community to thrive. And yeah, basically, it was really nice to have work that's older work. This is an ongoing portfolio that has been going on for over 30 years, as I am not only a participant in this joy and action with my friends and nightlife, but I also like to stand back and capture the joy to then share again with my friends later after the party's over, after the event has passed. We can continue to relive these moments. And also being from here and having these lifelong relationships with these chosen family, they truly are brothers and sisters because when you live in one place your whole life, you tend to build these really deep connected relationships that not everyone really gets to do. I think when people hear that I am born in Atlanta, raised in Atlanta, and never left Atlanta, it's kind of like, whoa, you're a unicorn. Like people usually come to Atlanta, but they grew up somewhere else. So thank you again for allowing me to share these images in such a very excellent curated exhibition. So thank you, Jamie, and thank you, David.
Thank you, Royce. The There's something very special about the energy of like a gospel house dance event. That's really, really joyous, and I just thought you really captured it so well in this image. It just reminds me of being on the floor and celebrating. So last but not least is Taylor Edgerton, who is from what I can tell, is not with us here tonight. But this is his piece, The Boy Green. So with that, I am going to stop sharing. And
there was a lot of thanks to me in this, David, and to you, but I just want to thank everybody for sharing their work. And if for any reason your work wasn't selected for this show and you had applied, there were so many things that I wanted to include but didn't quite fit for me in the visual aesthetic of the room. You know, pieces about real hardship and joy and love and family ancestry. So just know that I really appreciated seeing everything that I was given access to this show. It was an honor to get to do this.
yeah, Jamie, we have received so much excellent feedback on this show. It really it was a great way to start off the year. People will come in and they're like, wow, this work is really amazing. And, you know, it takes them on this journey of different emotions and scenarios that they get to work their way through. And so we're thrilled with the selections and the show that you put together. And we're so proud to be able to exhibit all this really, really strong work.
I'm not going to name names, but there's a gentleman that comes in all the time and he's usually a little grumpy. But he came in this time and he actually said, I'm going to come back. I want to see this again. And that's the first time I've ever had him come in and not tell me what was wrong with one of the images. So that's a
He
pretty
hates
high
everything.
praise.
So I want to be cognizant and considerate of everyone's time. We're at 8:35, so we're a little bit past the end. But does anybody have any burning desires, any questions that they wanted to ask either one of the other artists or Jamie before we closed out for the evening? Okay. So, well, Jamie, thank you so much again, and thank you for the PowerPoint that you put together for the beginning of it. It was interesting to see the historical references that you showed, and then to be thinking about those as we worked our way through the images tonight. So, thank you.
Thanks for humoring me on that one.
Yeah, Jamie,
Well,
thank you, Jamie, for the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And all you at Atlanta Photo Group, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, everyone, enjoy the rest of your evening, and we hope to see you at the gallery in person if you are here in Atlanta.
Thanks, David.
So good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Bye.
Good night.